Hey everyone, welcome to the show. My name is Keith Billik. This is the Picky Fingers podcast, and even though my name is Keith Billik, I've been running into more and more people lately that just call me Picky Fingers. I don't know whether to be insulted by that or not, but either way, I guess I brought it upon myself, so I might as well embrace it, right? At any rate, this is part 2 of our conversation with Ryan Cavanaugh. I'm going to get to that in just a minute, but if you didn't check out the first part of Ryan Cavanaugh's interview, that is the last episode number 10. This is number 11. Real quick, before we get into that, though, I do need to make sure to give a shout out to today's official Patreon supporter of the episode. It's a guy named Mike Tripico, and you can find Mike either at various infamous String Dusters concerts. He's a big fan of those guys, and so am I. Or you might be able to find him working as an astrophysicist for NASA out in Maryland, which, is really impressive. He must have picked up banjo because he needed a little more challenge in his life, something like that. Either way, Mike, I'm really happy to have you as a listener and also as a Patreon supporter. For any of the rest of you who haven't checked out the Patreon page, that's available at patreon.com/banjopodcast. That's how you become an official supporter of the show. And Mike Tripico, I really appreciate your support there, and as well as any of the rest of you who have donated through that page. One more announcement of something I have coming up, and I actually mentioned this a few episodes ago, but there's an event called the Great Lakes Music Camp that happens in western Michigan along the shores of Lake Michigan, and that's in early October. You can go to greatlakesmusic.org to check into that, but I'll be teaching banjo classes there. Bill Evans will be teaching banjo classes. For any of you who want to take classes with other instruments, there's a very star-studded cast of instructors that will be conducting classes and concerts, including songwriting and various other things. So that's going to be a great event, and I will be there. And a very special announcement for the podcast is that one of the class sessions actually will be a live recording of the Picky Fingers podcast, and the guest for that will be my fellow banjo instructor, Bill Evans. And that will take place live in front of an audience of whoever is at the camp and wants to come listen to it. I'm hoping to get a few audience questions involved, and that'll be a new experience for definitely for me, but hopefully people will enjoy seeing that. At any rate, that's greatlakesmusic.org. I'll be there teaching banjo, and I hope to see at least a couple of you. Come track me down if you're there. For those of you who won't be at the camp but still want to track me down, you can email the show at pickyfingersbanjopodcast@gmail.com or search for me on any of the main social media platforms. I'm on most of those. But now we're going to get back to the conversation with Ryan Cavanaugh. Once again, if you didn't hear the first half of it, you might want to go back and listen to episode 10 before you listen to the rest of this one, just to give yourself some context and background to what Ryan's talking about. But we're going to pick it up. One of Ryan's jazz heroes is a guitarist named John McLaughlin. And when Ryan was really starting to get very serious about jazz, he reached out to John via email and introduced himself, says, "I'm trying to play jazz on the banjo, and can you help me out?" And that's where we're going to pick up this conversation, is when he was first making contact with his jazz guitar hero, John McLaughlin. So here it is, Ryan Cavanaugh, part 2.
And I was very lucky. Yeah, he said, I know it sounds funny, but the saxophonist Bill Evans is a friend of mine, and he just did a record with Bela Fleck called Soulgrass, and he's looking for a banjo player. I'll see if I can get you a gig.
And at this point, he had not heard your playing. He has no idea.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. After the initial correspondence, he asked me to go into a recording studio and make him some improvisational MP3s. That was unheard of then, in 2005, to send an MP3. And so I taught myself how to do that. I went to a friend's studio, and his mom helped me convert, the final tracks digital
to the proper format.
Not
only is that unheard of, but just the fact that this legendary guitarist is willing to give you
blew my mind
the time of day, not knowing who you are.
I'd gotten a cold shoulder from most people in bluegrass circles at festivals then, probably because I was trying to bother them at work. but I'd failed at emails too. And like, this was my all-time hero.
Right.
That got back to me, and I was just flabbergasted.
Completely reinvigorated your drive.
I was just like, I've done all this work up till now. It's time to work even more, you know, and I brushed up on my chops. I started taking lessons with a local jazz saxophonist, and then Bill hired me and sent me all the emails going on. But Bill sends me a manila envelope, like a real thick one, full of scores for his songs. I mean, the whole score from front to end. It wasn't like we're going to play the A section and then 2 Bs. It wasn't like that.
There's a chart, and yeah.
You needed like 2 music stands, and I read the music to learn my part, and he said, I want you to, I don't want you to play what Bela played on the record. I want you to play your own thing.
That's great.
And I said, that is great.
Yeah.
I have room to grow now. Because there's some band leaders that want you to play exactly what's on the record, not him. And he made a point to say, and if I hear you playing the same shit every night, it's going to bug me. And I said, cool. I'm riding on John McLaughlin's recommendation here. I got to make this guy happy. So it kind of went from there. And I just was in an opportunity where it was better than jazz school. It was better. And it took John McLaughlin's talking me into it and reasoning with me that made me realize it, because I asked him, it was kind of sussing out my avenues into the first tour, and I was over somewhere in Europe, and we were hanging out with him, and I said, hey, could you get me a scholarship to Berklee School of Music? He's like, yeah, I could get you a full ride. I was like, wow. He's like, I could just make a call now and get you a full ride. And he looks at me, and then he looks at Bill, and he goes, but you're in school now.
Yeah.
You're in school now. You have a gig. And I didn't know who Bill Evans was. You know, this Bill Evans, I knew he was a bad dude.
Yeah.
But 80s jazz wasn't my thing. I wasn't into that Seinfeld slap pop bass thing. And I know Marcus Miller and John Schofield and Mike Stern and Bill Evans, they all pioneered that sound, that 80s New York sound, but it wasn't my thing. I wanted to play Miles Quintet, fusion, not the 80s stuff.
But John's point being that whole thing that you hear about, I don't know, the example I think of is like Stevie Ray Vaughan sneaking out of his house to go down to play blues with guys when he was 14.
Right.
Those opportunities aren't really there anymore.
They aren't.
For most people. And when you drill down, that is the way to learn.
Yeah.
And you had this.
And I got into the whole thing. I learned a lot about music. I got into the whole thing with, I told John McLaughlin, I was like, I just got into this whole thing. I sent that email to see if I could get a gig, number one, which I did, and to make friends with my hero and Dennis Chambers, who was, I heard him and McLaughlin on a record back in the day, and I was completely blown away by how they played together. And so shortly after McLaughlin tells me I'm in school, Dennis Chambers ends up in the Bill Evans Soulgrass band, and I'm getting commentary from him, and he's talking, and I learned that some of these guys that take these gigs for hire didn't necessarily like the music on the gig.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, they're taking the gig, or the guy they're working for that matter.
Yeah.
And I just kind of got some insight from my heroes on how that kind of worked. You don't need to learn. You don't need to like the music you're playing on the gig. You take the gig for a reason. You need money, or
just as part of your education and
part
your growth.
Part of your education. Part of my education was learning to play music I didn't like. And getting over that hurdle and doing the job, and kind of telling myself, I don't want this kind of element in this music for my own personal style. And I'm going to bookmark that as I play it, because I didn't want to develop habits that I didn't want to sound like I'm playing smooth jazz. And some of it was kind of like that at times. And there were a lot of like illuminated sus chords going on in some of these changes. And I didn't necessarily I wanted to play, but Dennis Chambers helped me, and John McLaughlin kind of guided me through that whole thing. And they were, even though I was in Bill's band, those were my advisors for 10 years, those two guys. And
just giving you a better perspective on how to look at it.
A very grounded perspective. Yeah, sound advice, sage advice, good musical advice. Play the gig. You don't have to take the gig home with you.
Yeah.
You know, it's not your identity. And that was really cool.
That is really good advice.
Yeah.
Even for people with day jobs could probably stand to hear that too. Maybe you're in office space and Lumberg is asking you to come in on Sundays, and that doesn't have to be who you are.
I felt like I was in 1980s German jazz hell for a lot of that time. Yeah, this is very clever, the banjo and jazz. I've heard this done with flectons, but this is new to me. You know, I'm hearing this every day. This is not a banjo, is it? Yes, it's a banjo.
And the reason they didn't know is because you had your solid body that you were playing.
Yeah,
for a lot of
I had
the
a Deering Crossfire that just looked ridiculous, and they thought it was a guitar.
Right.
You know. I'm sorry, maybe I'm getting off track. You keep me on track if I'm going off.
No, this is great. I love hearing about this.
Somewhere in the middle of my 10 years with Bill Evans, we played with a lot of artists: Randy Brecker, Dennis Chambers, John Schofield. A lot of the bluegrass people probably don't know who a lot of these people are. Mm-hmm. But a blues guitarist named Robin Ford did a tour with us, or maybe a couple, and he didn't like the banjo. He made it a point in his eccentric way to snidely and smugly tell me that he didn't like the banjo, and that was okay.
Just per se, nothing. It wasn't even you.
He told Bill to tell me. You know,
okay.
Bill's my band leader, and I was lucky to be on that tour. But I said, that's fine. I have an electric banjo. I'll change. Bill's like, well, you got to make it sound. Put some effects on it, and so I programmed my crappy multi-effects board at the time to, I think I made the rocker pedal speed up the vibrato and the intensity and the volume at the same time. So I put chorus on it, made banjo sound like an organ, and it really helped me comping for this blues guitarist just get...
Because you sounded more like a Hammond that would be expected.
Right, I could sit here and do like a reverse roll, and it would just sound like, with all the effects going on, it would just sound like an organ holding his keys down. Mm-hmm. And even from that, I was miserable. I wore glasses on that tour.
Just to hide behind?
It was a very big tour. Everything was on a Jumbotron.
Oh, wow.
We had these jazz festivals in Switzerland and stuff, and I made sure I wore these Buddy Holly glasses and grew a beard. Because I didn't want anybody knowing that was me.
It was your disguise?
Yeah, because I wasn't being me. I had to play organ on the banjo, and, you know, I had to do it for money. And
you were being quietly resented by people you were playing with.
Yeah, and probably some of the European jazz audience going, who's this guy?
Yeah.
You know, on this weird-looking guitar banjo piece of crap.
So earlier you said that you didn't learn anything that you needed to know until you played with Bill. What kind of things were you thinking about when you said that?
Chord inversions and voicing, and kind of how to I learned a lot about mainly fusion song arrangement. How to build a solo is what a long form solo. In now it's even working for me in like short bluegrass solos, but from how to build a line to make something creative, you know. You know, and
what is that? Is that an arpeggio of?
Just goes over. It's a 2-5-1. But just how to play the whole science of building a line like that or something tasteful. Mm-hmm. It tells a little story, right? Each one of the it tells a little story, but the formula of how it starts out with chord tones, your first extension, right? Some passing tones, where you can go chromatic. You know, where you can get by. I learned a lot about that. If you're going up, you can go pentatonic, and if you're coming down, you can go chromatic.
Okay.
Basically, as simply as that.
Is there a reason that works? Or it's just one of those...
It works on the human ear for some reason, coming down. Exploring coming down is what I learned.
Interesting. A lot of Indian music uses those concepts too. I don't know much about it, but...
Yep. You can do that too with the Indian music. They might go up a scale and change intervals coming down. So I learned a lot about that from learning. I had to trade fours with Bill Evans on up-tempo songs and like really, and just keep up with this guy that just had
that's intense.
A lot of energy. And somehow I needed to get that intensity out of the banjo, but where I really found it, it doesn't have to be the volume or the has how hard you touch the banjo. It has the content of what you're playing.
Yeah.
So it taught me I'm still exploring my fretboard when I improvise, but I'm exploring from a template that's in the back of my mind now. Because I've had enough training to do it. And before I was just like a hippie getting up there, I'm going to play some... And I was playing some intense stuff because I was trying to sound like John McLaughlin. But
you're talking about early in the Bill Evans band?
Yeah, but the biggest thing I learned was just like tasteful crafting of linear passages, improvised passages.
Almost any great musician who I've heard describe this says something to the effect of practice as hard as you can, all your scales and all this stuff, and then as soon as you get up on stage, forget all of it.
That's it, yeah.
And it seems like that's what you were just referring to. You have those templates so ingrained that you're not going to actually forget them, but just don't think about it.
And I've created my own based on simple ones I've learned, and it's grown nice. It's like I planted seeds that these guys gave me, and they show me the right things.
So a lot of this is going to be over people's heads. It's over my head, I'll admit it.
Okay.
So for people who want to achieve some sort of this style of playing, if they want to play bebop banjo, what were the early things that you did, and what are the most useful things that people can work on to help their playing?
Well, this applies to any type of music and anything that you're learning. So, I mean, I liked jazz to begin with, probably because I grew up north and I heard it at Christmas time and, Peanuts Christmas, and it was everywhere. It was at the mall. It was in Macy's. There was some guy playing the piano.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I had good memories of that, and for some reason, I did like the music genuinely.
The Sonny Rollins early on, and
yeah, it's kind of like how I enjoy hearing people speak Italian. It's just, that's pleasant, and then when I saw that there was a need to learn it, jazz was exponential, so I could learn a lot just by learning a little. And, but what I really suggest is that music's like a language. And if you were trying to learn Spanish, you wouldn't just read it out of a book and try to say the words. You'd want to listen to a lot of Spanish being spoken. You'd want to immerse yourself in a Spanish neighborhood or go to a Spanish grocery and try to jam with the people. Hola, ¿qué pasa?
Yeah. Even if you only know a few words, at least toss those out and see how far it gets you.
I tell people if they're trying, whether it's jazz or classical or, bluegrass or whatever, you got to listen. You just have to listen because you want to learn what you love. Mm-hmm. You don't want to learn what you don't love.
Right.
I mean, for some reason, I dig classical. I'm waiting till I'm an old man to sit there and learn it, because right now I'm not feeling it. It's not what I want to do. I still have some kind of mission with improvisation that some personal goals that I want to get out of the way. But keep it personal is what I'd say. Learn what you like. I don't learn... What I learned from these guys is I learned licks and songs and chords. I cherry-picked. And I made my own style with my little collection of, junk in a box. It's kind of how I look at it. But and some stuff led me. There's some stuff I had to learn more because I learned a little bit of it, and I was like, oh, I only half learned that, and so I have that to do. But listening to what you like is the most important part, because if you can sing it in your head, you can play it.
You'll know when you're not playing it, and therefore...
Yeah, you already know it.
You'll know when you've got it.
Playing a musical instrument is trying to transfer something organic through something mechanical. And I never wanted to sound...
That's interesting.
It's mind over matter, literally. I have to make this, like, machine sound like... I have to make this machine sound natural. Because if I don't sound natural to my audience... and I look like I'm trying too hard, it's
what
not
are they supposed to get out of it? Right?
What do they get? What kind of entertainment do they get?
Mm-hmm.
The most important part is to look like you're having fun, even when you're not. And it eventually made me have fun when I wasn't.
Fake it till you make it.
Fake it till you make it, yep.
I don't want to take too much of your time, but we actually haven't even talked at all about your banjo or any of your equipment. Is this your main instrument right here?
Yep, this is a Deering Tenbrooks Legacy model.
And what about that attracted you to the instrument?
They gave it to me.
That's an attractive feature.
It attracted me to it.
But what separates this from all the other contest banjos that you had to go get rid of for money?
It was much better. It was much better than a Gibson banjo, and I did not want to admit that to myself. Jens Kruger.
Is that what you had earlier? Were you playing a Gibson until you had this?
I've had this for 10 years.
Okay.
So I was playing a Gibson, some contest Gibson I'd won until up then. It wasn't very good. But Jens Kruger helped me get this banjo from Deering, and now I'm good friends with the Deering people. And this banjo has a 15-inch radius fingerboard.
Right.
It has a very thick neck, which I really like. It keeps it in tune.
Do you feel like that affects the sound quite a bit? I usually think that the neck is an underrated contributor to the banjo tone.
I think it has a huge deal to do with the sound, especially if it's thicker up near the headstock. My fretboard's wider. The intonation's better, and I notice the intonation's better when I have to play like in a different key. You know, like if I have to go up here to like E flat.
Yeah, that's right on.
Yeah.
And you think that the thickness of the neck and the width help with that?
Yeah, they really help with tuning stability, I've noticed. I really like that.
Is that individual to your instrument, or is this the standard model that anybody would get if they went to a store and bought one?
I think this is the standard model everybody would get. The Tenbrooks Legacy is the mahogany version, so it sounds more like I'd like the mahogany tone.
Yep.
I've heard maple ones that sound really great. This is just the first one they put in my hands that I fell in love with. So.
And this one is mahogany, you said?
This one is mahogany,
okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And my bridge is 11/16 radius. I know banjo nerds
Deering
love
bridge?
this. Deering bridge, yep. I only use Deering bridges. Standard head.
And by standard, you mean Weather King? Or,
Remo Frosted Weather King, and F sharp.
F sharp, that's very low, right?
Yep.
Very loose.
Yep, and by being that loose, it really helps. It just stays in tune for stuff like B flat.
It doesn't give you tuning problems in terms of your bridge sagging into the head, or it's not quite that bad?
It's not quite that bad, and it gives a nice it gives me a nice round tone when I need it. I get a nice bluegrass tone when I need it, you know.
Yeah. It does have some extra like tubbiness when you dig into bluegrass a little more than most instruments.
Yeah, it has everything I'm going for. I like to fill out an ensemble when I play with it, especially if a mandolin's chopping and a guitar's just playing regular chords, but I like to fill out the mid-range a little more. This is the Bela Flex influence on me, and If
I've heard that Bela's is probably even tuned lower than yours.
It's about the right spot. You'd be surprised how similar our banjos are.
Okay.
Very similar. His bridge is probably a little bit higher than mine. I think my tailpiece is, I just measured the tailpiece height the other day. It's on my phone, but my tailpiece is pretty high. Mostly. And by high, you mean like not very much of a break angle over the bridge toward the tailpiece? It's high over the head. Like, I don't know. What's that? Half an inch?
Yeah.
Looks like it's about half an inch or.
Higher than average.
Higher than most. Yeah. And my reason is this is a utility. It's an all-in-one banjo. If I was like Eric Clapton and traveling with a bunch of banjos like he does with guitars, I'd have my arch top and my, Granada flathead that I'd play this song on. But for now, this one is convenient, and I have it set up so I can play in those other keys and still.
It sounds really good on everything.
Yeah, and have as good as it can on everything. So,
do you have a preference for what microphones you use live or in the studio, or are you mostly pickup when you're performing?
I do. When I play in the studio, I do prefer an old RCA ribbon mic.
Yeah.
Or a remake. I like ribbon mics on the banjo a lot.
That's what that one is.
Lately, I've been using a Shure KSM 32 because they're cheap and they're really flat. They're not voiced. And I can record with, mainly I record with those at home when I have to do, because I can't afford an RCA ribbon mic. Live, I use an original, I think it's a first generation Shure SM98. And,
wow, is that a condenser?
It's a condenser microphone.
That's one of those small ones, right?
Yep.
Like kind of, were they made as a drum microphone?
Yep.
Am I thinking of that right?
Saxophone.
Saxophone.
Yep. The Beta was the drum mic.
Okay.
But I found an original in a drawer at home, and I custom put it into a new. I'd lost the gooseneck, and now it works. I'm using an EMG second generation pickup.
And that's still on your acoustic instrument?
Yep.
Okay.
It's right under the bridge here. I think it's called the EMG Barrel.
Okay.
Myself and Chris Pandolfi kind of road tested this pickup that EMG was making, because they make the humbucker. We didn't like how that sounded, and then by working with the company, I think Chris and I road tested this thing for like 3 years, and it's finally out. But it's called the EMG Barrel pickup. You can find it on their website. It's very similar to the Fishman.
What was your feedback to them on it? Was it pretty good right off the bat, or did you
the second generation one or the first one?
Whatever they had you and Chris testing, did they get feedback from you about changes that they needed to make?
We had to push them really hard. I was like, really appreciate the free humbucking pickups, but this isn't working for me. Mm-hmm. And Chris and Bela must have said that at the same time. And then it's like, man, if you make one like the Jones or the Fishman, I sent the EMG CEO like a bunch of pickups from banjos.
Yeah.
And he's literally like a bored electrical engineer. That's and he's like, banjo is the final frontier. He's not finished yet.
I would have expected the exact opposite.
Yeah.
Like, banjo is 1% of our market. I couldn't care less about this Ryan Cavanaugh guy.
He's already very successful, and he just likes the challenge. I gotta admit, I really like a cat like that.
Yeah.
And he's going for it. And basically, this pickup comes, all EMG pickups do, but this new pickup, it has a preamp that goes in there with it, and that is voiced. You can hardwire an EQ on a pickup.
Yep.
And so he's done that and scooped a lot of like the 440 out of it. It still feeds back because it's a banjo. But I blend that with the microphone, and
that does a pretty good job.
It does a pretty good job. And when if I did, for instance, I was playing a bunch of like rock club dates with Jenny Lynn Gardner, and I just used the pickup, and it's just fine.
Yeah.
It's just fine through old.
Yeah, no one.
And it made me happy. It sounded good. I got the tone I wanted out of it. Of course, other banjo players, if they come to the show, they'll sit there with their arms crossed and tell you how your tone could have been better.
Of course.
But I was happy with it. So
good.
I do recommend that pickup.
And what do you use to blend them? Do you have an outboard preamp thing?
I use a Grace Designs Felix.
Those are fantastic.
Dual channel preamp. Yeah, it's very nice. Great. I run a parametric EQ after the pickup, before the Felix, and I cut I cut, I think, 440, 339, 2K, and 600. I just surgically cut them out and send it to the sound man. Pretty narrow, and it works really well. Strings, I think I use a pretty light gauge. 10, so I'll go from the top. 10, 11, 13, 20. I'd rather have a 21, but they're hard to find, and a 10.
Interesting.
And I'm going for a tone. Like I said, it's not like every. I don't know. I'm kind of going for a combination of a bunch of different things, but
yeah, you really have to have a versatile setup for what you do.
Yeah,
and I don't know if it's ironic or not, but strangely enough, the band you play mostly with now is a pretty traditional, bluegrassy kind of group
compared to what I'm used to playing. Very much so.
And how do you view that? Is that refreshing, or
was it just refreshing.
Something in your mind that you wanted to get back to that a bit?
When I was in Europe for years with Bill Evans, I was kind of like the sideshow act in that band.
Mm-hmm.
I was Bill Evans's artistic badge, kind of. I have a banjo in my. He was trying to say to his European audience, "I have a banjo in my band. This is legit New Orleans jazz history. This guy's doing new stuff, but this is fresh."
And somehow I found this guy, even though it was the other way around.
Yep. So he was kind of showing me off of what I could do. But the Europeans, they look at the banjo like, we look at the accordion or the balalaika or the bamboo flute. They're just like, oh, it's a banjo.
Yeah.
They weren't really, there were places where they clearly played. I asked to, in Italy, I would play the most amazing fusion banjo solo, that I could at the time. And, right after Bill, and I wouldn't get a clap, and I started experimenting. It's like, I'm just
with what would get claps?
Yeah. And instead of like, or whatever I was playing, and started doing forward rolls anywhere I could. And when I played Earl Scruggs rolls, like obvious ones, like just kind of like going for it, howling at the moon kind of stuff, those Italian and Spanish audiences went nuts.
Wow.
And I asked some people in some of those towns, I was like, I tried this tonight, and this is what happened. I played banjo music, go figure, on the banjo night. People went crazy. And one of the people in the small town, yes, they've been playing reruns of Beverly Hillbillies on TV here for the last 10 years. Like, oh, that makes sense.
And so when I saw you with Bill Evans, were you playing that stuff on your electric banjo through distortion and all this business?
Some of it. I mean, he wanted electric banjo specifically, so he could change it up by asking me to play through an effect. Or I was really encouraged to experiment with that stuff as well, with what I played, and I had guidance from some of the best players in the world, of course. Hey, John McLaughlin, what do you use for effects? But the Europeans weren't holding on to the banjo, and I needed to make a change in my life, and I left and joined the Jeff Austin band. And my whole goal was just to get back on the bluegrass scene here, because, I all my friends look like they're having so much fun here in the United States, and I was, I was happy playing jazz, but it was time for a change, and it was time to apply what I know on jazz to just relaxing into a bluegrass style that I have all of that.
Do you feel like it's more accepted now than when you were a kid and getting those snide looks at the festivals, now that you have a lot more progressive players out there who are gaining
traction? So. I think it's changed drastically, but when I was a kid, I wasn't 18 and I couldn't get into a hippie festival.
Right.
Or a bluegrass festival. So I don't know. I'm pretty sure. I mean, Bela Fleck is prolific. What he did with the Flecktones is prolific. Even as some of us will turn up their nose at this, but even bands like Yonder Mountain String Band made a huge impact on bluegrass.
Yeah, they were the first of those jam grass.
Yeah, they might have been the first reason many people put a pickup in their banjo, and that might not sound like a big deal today, but when I when I realized when I was a kid that Bela Fleck used a pickup, I had to have one. What does this do?
Right.
Can it help me? Can it hinder me? And that's enough to change the music.
Yeah.
One piece of equipment on somebody's banjo is enough to change the whole thing. And
anytime one person raises the bar,
Yep.
everyone who comes after him is viewed through that and held to a different
My dad made
standard.
me this goofy pickup mount for my jack because the EMG jack wasn't working.
That's pretty slick.
And you clip the mic on here. I guarantee in 2 years I'm going to see similar designs of this on somebody's banjo.
I hope so.
Yeah, and it just happens that way. So I think it's changed enough to where I feel really comfortable in it. And I've gotten to meet a lot of my heroes in the past couple weeks because I've only been doing this with this new band for like 3 or 4 months. Mm-hmm. But Rhonda Vincent and Jens Kruger, and I get to see these people and play with them, and it's delightful. It's just, I really like it.
Yeah, that's great. I'm sure they're happy to have you back in the community.
Yeah, and most have never even knew of me, which I didn't expect them to.
Wow.
But
Okay.
it's kind of nice meeting somebody that doesn't know you or of you. I gotta say, that must be really hard being like a celebrity or something, but I really like meeting somebody on just human terms and not with some pretension hanging over you. You know?
Yeah, you don't have a reputation that who knows what they've heard about you.
Yeah, and now I'm really comfortable because I've been out of the bluegrass scene. I was out of it for so long. I'm comfortable doing what I know is best for me in my playing, not what Joe Schmo, banjo hangout fan in the audience thinks he wants me to play.
Yeah.
I used to worry a lot about that because banjo's heavy on that, right? It's
Right.
like, are you playing like the latest player? Do you know the latest lick? Are you using Hofmeyer picks? You know, or whatever. I learned to keep my own counsel and let social hierarchy go to the wayside. I don't care about that stuff anymore.
It seems like it's served you well. One thing we didn't mention is, so what's the name of the band that you're playing with now?
Oh, Songs from the Road Band.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how do people find information about you and your playing or your group online?
You can go to www.ryancavanaughbanjo.com, or I'm sure you can find Songs from the Road Band on Facebook. You can also find my artist page on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I think I'm R. Cavanaugh Banjo on Instagram. All kinds of places. You can just Google my name.
Use the Google machine.
All my music's on iTunes. I don't have a lot of my own stuff out because I've been playing in so many bands for a while, but hopefully some new stuff will come out as this new band comes into fruition. And
Are you going to? Do you have a recording planned with the new band? I actually bought the Songs from the Road record and was, I don't want to say disappointed that you weren't on it because Andy Thorne's on it and he's great too.
yeah,
But
I think there's
but
a
I was
lot of
expecting
people
Ryan
that
Cavanaugh.
I think there's a lot. Yeah, I think next year, or maybe at the end of this year, we'll record a new record. But yeah, I'll be on the following records.
Yeah, whatever
And,
the next thing ends up being.
And this, the songs are good. I gotta say that the songs on the record that you bought.
Yeah, they're
I
very
joined
cool.
this band for the songs. I wanted to be in a band that wasn't about technical prowess and I don't know, something like that. But these guys wrote some amazing songs with Sean Camp and various other Nashville hit writers, and it's a pleasure to play them because they aren't typical.
Yeah, that's great.
And that's going to move the music forward. If somebody starts playing one of their songs at a jam, and it happened, and
The next Wagon
that
Wheel
catches on, that's what they wanted to do. One of their songs is like that. But they're lovely guys. They're lovely players. This fiddle player in the band, James Schlender, he's from Montana, and he's a 2-time national fiddle champ. Amazing. 24 years old.
Wow.
Burning fiddle player. Every night we broadcast our live shows while we're on tour on an app called Mixlr, Mixlr, and you can listen to the stream for free, or we upload the show the next day.
Wow, I'm going to check that out.
And you can listen to it. There's a
On the
library of
website,
tunes on there.
you can figure it out.
Songs from the Road Band with no spaces on the Mixlr app. And yeah, you can go through there and listen to board mixes.
Well, you're in the right. So what you should do to start the next wagon wheel trend is you need to figure out which of the songs it's going to be. And then when you're at a place like this is where you need to take advantage of it.
Yes.
Every circle you get into.
Oh, absolutely.
Just shove it down people's throats. You're playing this, and this is how it goes. And
this band has a lot of tunes that are gonna. I think they're gonna change. I can't predict anything, but I really like to listen to them. They're beautiful lyrics. And
well, I can't wait to hear more of it. I'm going to check out those live streams. That's good to know.
Right on. Yeah, let me know what you think. And thank you, everybody out there in Banjo Land.
Yeah, thanks for your time, Ryan. Take it easy.
Thanks.
And that's going to do it for part 2 with Ryan Cavanaugh and for this episode of the Picky Fingers podcast. Thanks for listening to the show. You can contact me at pickyfingersbanjopodcast@gmail.com. Search for me online on all the social media stuff and make sure you follow me. Make sure you subscribe on all the Stitchery, iTunesy places that you find your podcasts. What else? Oh yeah, Patreon. Donate to the Patreon page. That's patreon.com/banjopodcast. You can become a supporter of the show, and I really, really appreciate that. Thanks again to Mike Tripico, who was the official Patreon sponsor of this episode. But that's it for now. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see y'all next time.